We sure do have a lot of wands around here. We're a big Harry Potter family, you know. I suppose in the absence of Ollivanders, we could start our own wand shop. Or maybe I could sell these out of a trench coat to poor wizards in Diagon Alley. Speaking of wizards, we're going to be talking about the Wizards of Wine chapter in Curse of Strahd. We're going to be covering some unanswered questions that you find in the chapter, expanding some motivations, and adding a little bit of extra content and some inspiration to help you step up your game. The Wizard of Wines as a chapter is very tightly intertwined with the Yester Hill chapter and the character of Baba Lysaga, so before you make any changes to the winery, you have to consider all three of those as a whole before you do anything. Now, before we tackle the winery itself, let's take a look at Baba Lysaga and why she's doing what she's doing. Why has she enlisted the help of these Druids to attack the winery? What's her end goal? Obviously, she wants to get rid of the Mardikovs at the winery because they're the keepers of the feather and they've been undermining her precious baby boy, Strahd. But there's got to be more to it than that. What's her success criteria in this little mission of hers? Well, here you go. Instead of just the Mardikovs and the wereravens at the winery, she wants to kill every single raven in Barovia. Lycanthrope and normal raven alike. Why? Because they all look alike. You can't tell the difference from one to another. And if there's no ravens, there's no wereravens. So that's her goal. Extinction of every single raven in Barovia. Now that we've got Baba Lysaga's background motivation out of the way, let's take a look at three of the unanswered questions that you find inside the winery's chapter. The first is, why did the Druids even come back to the winery after they stole the magic gem? Wouldn't it make more sense for them to just wait until their monstrous creation comes along and smashes everything down? The second question is, why are they poisoning the wine? They plan on destroying the place anyway, so what's with the poison? It's a little bit superfluous, don't you think? And the third unanswered question is, what is the goal for the tree blight, Wintersplinter, that they're sending in to destroy the winery? There's got to be more to him, right? They went to an awful lot of trouble to create him, so there's got to be more than just knocking down a single building in a vineyard, right? Okay, so now for our first question. Why did the Druids come back? Well, we know that they came in and they stole a magic gem and then they ran all the way back down to Yester Hill and they started creating Wintersplinter. But then they immediately turned right back around, hoofed it back to the winery, shoved the Mardikov family out and started ransacking the place. It's obvious that they're looking for something, but it's never specified what. So let's talk about that and fill that little detail in. Now, to do that, I think we have to look at an unanswered question for the Druids themselves in the Yester Hill chapter. And that question is, why can't they change into animals like other Druids can? Well, and I know the pragmatic answer to this, and that's they don't have that ability in the Monster Manual stat block. But let's forget about that reality for just a second and imagine that this band of Druids was able to shapeshift once upon a time, generations ago, before the mists enshrouded Barovia. Now, back then, they were a, normal, peaceful, loving, hippy-dippy bunch of Druids, just like you'd expect them to be. And then the darkness came. They planted the Golthius tree. They began to worship Strahd von Zarovich as the icon of the land, and they basically became evil. At that point, they lost their attunement to nature, if you will, and they could no longer change into an animal form. And they've been salty about it ever since. Well, now here they are, amidst their holy war against the wereravens, and their aha moment is, these folks that we're going after can change into animals. Wonder if we can get that ability for us too. So here the Druids are. They're faced with a clan of people that can shapeshift into ravens. Now that's just one animal, but it's one more animal than the Druids can shapeshift into. They're hell-bent on figuring out their secret. So they've arrived back at the winery to figure out what that secret is, take it for themselves. Now, unfortunately for the Druids, this is a fruitless endeavor, but they don't know that. They're not going to find anything at the winery that's going to help them. Lycanthropy is a curse that can't be taken. It has to be given willingly. And there's no way that the Mardikovs are going to bestow this curse on a bunch of Druids that have been attacking the winery. When the Druids came back, their intent was to interrogate the Martikov family, forcefully, if necessary. But the Martikovs have been on high alert for the past few days. They're not going to get caught by surprise again. So when the Druids began to move through the forests northwards towards the winery, the Martikovs were ready. They raised the alarm, and the entire family packed their things to get the hell out of Dodge. Well, except for one, the patriarch, Davian Martikov. He ordered the rest of his family to pack up and leave as quickly as they could, while he did whatever he could to stem the tide of the incoming Druids and Blights. Now, unfortunately, it wasn't much, but it did allow the other Martikovs to escape to safety. Now, Davian is held hostage in Area W19, one of the two bedrooms. Take your pick, either one. Let's put a pin in that, and we'll talk about that a little bit later when we cover additional quests. Our next unanswered question is, why are the Druids poisoning the wine? They plan on destroying the place anyway, so isn't that just a little extra? Here's what's going on. The Druids worship Strahd like a god, and they worship the land that he represents. By extension, they also revere the forlorn nature of Barovia and its environment. Anything that goes against Strahd and the land is blasphemous. Likewise, anything that brings levity and lets people escape from that forlorn and depressive mentality, that's sacrilege. So here we have the Martikovs, obvious blasphemers, and here we have their wine. This is sacrilege incarnate. So rather than bust open the vats and let this wine spill onto the land that they revere so much, they're going to poison it. And they're going to distribute it in disguise to all the taverns around Barovia. And they're going to let the people drink it. They're going to let the blasphemers die. They're going to kill as many of them as they can with their poison of choice. As far as the encounter inside the fermentation room goes, when your characters show up, don't just have the druid up on the catwalk pouring vials of poison into the vats. That's a little too on the nose, a little too hokey and Bond villain, if you will. Instead, have the vats already be poisoned when they get there, and just have empty vials that have a putrid smell about them scattered about. This is going to provide a bit more of a satisfying mystery for the players to solve. What was in these vials, and what happened to it? If you've got a player with a high enough passive perception score, maybe they can even kind of smell something is a little off about these vats of wine. And I don't mean the smell of the feet of the Martikov family, although that's probably pretty funky too. In terms of dealing with the poisoned wine, I really like a suggestion by community member Dragna Carta. He suggested leaving a scroll of Purify Food and Drink somewhere else before the winery. Not a lot of characters have this spell prepared beforehand. Why would you, right? So it allows them to cast that particular spell and clear the wine up, no problem. It also allows for a bit of foreshadowing to come into play before they even get to the winery. Our next unanswered question is, what's next for Wintersplinter? Now, the Druids went to an awful lot of trouble to create him. They had to steal the gem, take it back, do a ritual, and all that whole song and dance. So there's got to be more to his life and his purpose than just knocking down a single house at the vineyard. So what's next? What's Baba Lysaga's goal for this big tree blight? Well, like I said before, Baba Lysaga wants to kill every single raven in Barovia. To that end, her spies have identified the Blue Water Inn as another potential haunt for the wereravens and the Keepers of the Feather. That's right. Wintersplinter's going to head to Vallaki if your players don't do anything about it. Now, this is probably not going to happen. Chances are Wintersplinter's going to bite it somewhere around Yester Hill. But, barring that, he's going to walk right up to the gates of Vallaki, start knocking them down, and he's going to barrel straight forward towards the Blue Water Inn. You think the Feast of St. Andrew was bad? Vampires can't enter homes uninvited. Tree blights do double damage to them. Vallaki's just not a good place to be nowadays. Now that we've covered those mysteries of the chapter, let's talk about some additional quests that you can add in. Here's where we're going to circle back around to good old Davian Martikov. He's being held hostage, as I said, by the Druids inside the winery, and they are Well, they're not treating him very good. They've beaten him within an inch of his life, and he's only got a few hit points left. He doesn't even have enough hit points left to transform into a wereraven and fly away. Now, when your players come up on the Svalich Road toward the winery, they're going to be met by Adrian as per the module. Except when Adrian takes them back into the forest to the Mardukov encampment, they're not going to be met by Davian, obviously, because he's not there. Instead, Adrian has taken up his father's mantle as leader of the Mardukov family. And he's obviously a little bit shaken, a little bit despondent. He has no idea if his father is alive or dead, but he's going to implore the party to help him out, to go and liberate the winery and find any information they can about his father and get him out alive if they can. When viewed from afar, the winery is a pretty idyllic scene, even with the Druids inside. All the blights are hidden inside the vineyard, and all the Druids are inside the house, so it looks fairly innocuous. Except when you actually try to get in and walk past the vineyards, and then you get mobbed by a bunch of needle and twig guys. Well, that's all fine and dandy, and I have no problem with that, but let me pose an alternate approach to you. So instead of that idyllic scene, when viewed from afar, the winery is surrounded by all of these blights. They're standing guard while the Druids inside are ransacking the place. Now, instead of having to walk through the vineyards and get ambushed by the blights, your players are aware of what they're walking into. Now, that may sound kind of stupid, except for the fact that there's about 60 blights, and they have to figure out how to get in. How are they going to do that? Well, one particular example is maybe they create a distraction. They split the party. One of them causes a diversion and draws the blights away. The others get in. Or maybe they enlist the help of the Mardukov family. Now, I've never tested that, but it seems like a fun idea. So go ahead and try it if it speaks to you, and let me know how it goes. Our next quest is all about figuring out what Baba Lysaga and the Druids are up to. Now, if you were the Mardukov family and your home had been attacked 3-4 times or whatnot, you might be asking something like, why, God, why? Or, something to that effect. Now, the Mardukovs have tried to answer this question already. They've sent numerous of their scouts down to Yester Hill and into the ruins of Berez, but none of them have come back. So they have absolutely no information. They're completely in the dark on this, and that is not somewhere the Keepers of the Feather are comfortable being. So they're going to ask your characters, your players, to figure out any information that they can while they're trying to get those magical gems back. This is more of a soft quest that rides along with the other ones, but it's going to be something that's going to earn them some major brownie points towards gaining the trust of the Keepers. Now remember, the Keepers they're not a trustworthy bunch, so it's going to take a lot for your characters and your players to gain that trust. This is a big step along the way. Our next quest centers around rescuing those missing scouts. Now, the scouts that went down to Yester Hill have, unfortunately, all met their demise. They landed in trees around the clearing, and well, those trees were infested with blights that ambushed them. When your characters do go down there, perceptive ones might notice a few wereraven corpses on the ground. The scouts that went to Berez, on the other hand, are alive for the time being. They've been captured by Baba Lysaga, and they can be found inside the cages just outside of her hut. Now, that's every scout except for one. Ms. Muriel Vinshaw managed to escape, but only just barely. Players can still find her in the ring of standing stones just outside the swamp, but she's very badly injured. She cannot transform into a wereraven to fly away unless they heal her. And she's not going to get very far on foot either. So when your players do arrive and they encounter her, they're free to heal her. If they do, she shares the information in the module about the swamps and about Baba Lysaga. She can volunteer any other information that you deem pertinent, but remember, she's a Keeper of the Feather and they are a secretive bunch. So when she's able to, she's going to slink away, and when she's out of sight of the party, she's going to transform into a wereraven and make a beeline back to the winery to report to the Mardukov family. Now, returning Muriel to the winery gives you a good opportunity to unleash reinforcements. The battle against Baba Lysaga is a major stumbling block for a lot of parties. A lot of them end up wiping in this area. Baba's a very tough boss in the module. Having the extra backup from ravens arrive several rounds into combat can give them the bolstering that they need to keep the module going. One of the major goals of the chapter is to gain the confidence of the Keepers of the Feather and the Mardukov family. The Mardukovs form the core of the Keepers, and they've been doing this for generations and generations. They're not a very trusting and open bunch, as I've said before. Gaining their trust is going to be difficult. It is important, however, if they want to defeat Strahd here. Players, that is. The Keepers, over the generations, have seen adventurers come and they've seen adventurers go. These folks roll in Barovia all the time, and they die all the time, either from the land or their own despair, or from sometimes even Strahd himself. But the pattern is the same. Nobody lasts long. The ones that endure are the Keepers, and that's because they keep their heads down and their mouths shut. In order to gain the confidence of the Keepers, your characters and your players are really going to have to earn it. Those gems are going to have to come home. Those scouts are going to have to be rescued. Wintersplinter and the Druids are going to have to be defeated. And because it's not all about the Mardukovs and what the party can do for them, the party's going to have to be doing some serious good throughout the land as well. As your party travels through the land of Barovia doing this deed and that deed and hopefully getting under Strahd's skin, you need to ask yourself a series of questions regarding the Keepers and whether or not they reveal themselves. Would they risk their legacy? Would they risk their livelihood? Would they risk their lives? Would they risk the lives of their children's children to help these people? Are these people worth it? Well, are they?